Okay, it's 1:13 or 1:14 in the morning. Okay, there are different topics I could get into, from going through parallel universes, traveling through different times, but however, I'm not a time traveler. I'm more of a person that goes through different parallel Earth. One thing I remember very clearly was about my original Earth when I used to read the Bible like crazy. So I read everything in the Bible, and excuse me, no matter which Earth I was in, there was always something in common. It was a story of when Moses, when he led his people to the promised land. It was always the same story until maybe, I would say, until my 30s. Then all of a sudden, the story of the promised land changed. In my original timeline, and even all the other parallel universe I went through, was when Moses went to the promised land. It actually was not a desert. It actually was flourishing with green vegetation and water like a lost paradise in the middle of the desert. It was like a mirage. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. That's the way it was described, and it was deserted from anybody living there. Later on, they went around the nearby neighbors that were not really living in the promised land, but more on the outskirts. And of course, they went to conquer them. It was because they required more territory and had to be a little bigger, but not very big, but just bigger by God's command. And then all of a sudden, when I was in my 30s, the story changed again. The story became that it was desolated and that others were living there, and it was referred to as the land of Canaan. Moses and his people had to walk in the desert for 40 years. In this reality, the borders that God made to Abraham was occupied, and they had to, conquer the land. So it kind of changed. I remember just so sharply what I originally read. That's one thing of many. A lot of my other lives I have lived was through others, parallel reality or parallel Earth. The memory kind of totally disappeared. The only reason why I remember them is because I kept on talking to myself to not forget or to be wiped off my memory. I remember I used to remember them so clearly like it was just yesterday. But now it's kind of like I'm holding on to these memories but question them. I had to literally train my mind and make myself remember since they were slipping away. These new ones are not my actual memories, but replaced memories. So now, these are just memories to remember them. You understand what I'm saying? It's like, let me use a perfect example. I tell you a story. Okay, perfect. You listen to my story. So in your mind, you have the story I told you. And if in a year from now you remember my story and say, oh, the story that Gino told me, and you remember because you created into your mind what you believe I've experienced. Yet you didn't really experience it. So that's what happened to me. It's like when I had my original experience in each alternate reality, which I remember clearly. Now it's gone. It slowly faded and slightly vanished. It's like it just totally went away. As I said in one of my previous videos, where what happens is that when you wake up in the morning, you remember your dream very perfectly. Then vividly, all of a sudden, it just disappears. For those of you who experience it, know what I'm talking about. Just wanted to mention this. I don't know why this went through my thoughts, but all of a sudden I remember this part of the Bible, the story and wherein each reality is slightly different. In my original reality, we were Catholic. We came to Canada and stayed as Catholics. And then all of a sudden in this reality, we went from being Catholic to being Jehovah's Witnesses. I also went to study other beliefs from Buddhist, Islam, and many others. And finally, the Jewish faith. It's just history keeps changing on me. Like, whatever I wish for becomes a reality when I think about it hard enough. It's like the universe kind of changes around me. That's why sometimes I believe I'm actually in the Matrix and I'm creating what I want, and that this all simply an illusion. This is exactly what I'm experiencing. I truly feel that I am not alone in this, and this happens to everybody, whoever actually exists. Remember, in one of my chronicle books, I talk about the background people, which means that people you think they exist. Let's use hypothetically, in this reality, supposedly, I think there are close to 8 billion people in the whole world. But what if there's only, let's say, 8,000 people on this planet, and the rest are just a figment of our imagination? They're called background people. They don't really exist. We make them exist, but they don't exist. We have convinced ourselves that they do, yet there are only truly 8,000 people. This was simply an example, and those of us that actually do exist is every time we fall asleep, we wake up in a new reality that we don't realize it because it's faded away, and you accept the real you woke up in without realizing it changed. All the information is put into our brain as this is the only life you have ever known. You could have maybe yesterday been a white person, wherein the life before you were a black person, or you were Oriental, or you were etc., etc. And then you keep on experiencing what it is to be each person and not realize that you are actually changing on a regular basis. You could be spending 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years in this body that you're living in. And then next thing, you wake up in a new one and not realize it. And of course, the majority of you are going to think I'm nuts, I'm crazy, because I think I'm nuts and crazy. So, okay, anyway, I'll leave it like this. Anyways, I'll see you, I guess, on the next video. Good night.